Welcome again, everyone. What a beautiful sight to see all of you here today. I do not have a pet. Sometimes when I go and celebrate confirmation, I give the boys and girls an opportunity to ask me questions, and in some parishes they've got a million questions, and in others I just can't get them started. So I always say, doesn't anyone want to know about my pets? So somebody will raise their hand and say, do you have a pet? And I say no. Now, I don't know, I've heard this before, I'm sure you've heard this, but for those pet owners who have dogs, it has often been said that the dog and the owner resemble each other. Have you ever heard that? That's probably one of the reasons why I do not have a pet. I'd be afraid to see what would resemble me. And that's kind of a funny example about having such a close relationship that you end up, even with our pets and our animals, we even end up having something in common or something that makes us appear as one. It might sound like a strange jumping off point, but on this feast of the Trinity, we celebrate the fact that there is one God with three persons who are in such love with each other that when you see one, you see the other. That's why when Jesus was on earth and he said, if you see me, you have seen the Father. Because the Father and I are one. In that context, I would like to invite our deacons to become such like Jesus in their acts that when people see you, they see Jesus. When they hear you, they hear Jesus. In the first reading today from Exodus, in trying to describe God, trying to describe the indescribable, we hear the characteristics and traits of God. You could recognize God because God is merciful. God is gracious. He's slow to anger. He's rich in kindness and fidelity. In trying to explain what God looks like, the author is describing those characteristics of God so that you can imagine then what God would be like. When Jesus was on earth, he said, if you see me, you see the Father. And we know the Father's a spirit, so Jesus wasn't talking about the color of his hair or his eyes or the beard or what he wore. He was talking about himself, his person, who he was, how he acted, what he was like. And if you see Jesus, you see the Father. As deacons and as priests, even more so than the faithful, although it is a general invitation for all of us, we are called to mirror Christ to God's people so that they would have a sense of what Jesus is like. They would have a sense of how Jesus could be a part of their lives when they are celebrating and when they are suffering. That when they see us, when they interact with us, they feel the presence of Jesus. I was mentioning to our deacon candidates the other night after we had a practice here, I was interviewed by MLive for this ceremony. They were captivated by this whole notion of having so many men being ordained as permanent deacons. And somewhere along the line it caught on that with the 9, including Jerry, who is being ordained as a transitional deacon, this is history for our diocese. It's the largest group of permanent of deacons, permanent deacons, at one time to be ordained. But I was being interviewed for that article, and Vaughn was so interested in what this service was like and how these men are going to now serve the church. And at some point in time, I said to him, it's important to make the distinction that we don't define deacons by what they do. Deacons are defined by who they are. Priests are not to be defined by what they do. Priests are defined by who they are. And who we are images of Jesus Christ. We all grow to an age where maybe we can't do those things that deacons and priests do any longer because of our age and our health. But it's who we are. In the image and likeness of Jesus Christ. And that when people see us and hear us, they feel that they are with Christ. Because we could be doing all sorts of things, even wonderful things of service. We can be reaching out to the poor. We can be comforting those who are sick and suffering. We can bring relief to people who are in despair or are suffering some type of crisis in their lives. We can do all of those things, but if we are not Christ for them, then we're missing our vocation. And I think that the brief reading from Exodus is a very good starting point. That God is merciful, that he's gracious, he's slow to anger, rich in kindness and fidelity. God knows there are going to be occasions when with such an open heart you're going to want to reach out to God's people, and they're just not going to be ready to accept it. And you're going to get, rather than a positive response, you're going to get a negative response. And the one thing you'll realize in this ordination of diaconate, your humanity stays with you. You don't become inhuman. And there will be times when you will not want to be patient, that you will want to be angry, that you will want to be less merciful. And that's where we have to be reminded, it's not what we do, it's who we are. Society today looks upon people by what they do rather than who they are. We live in a world that if we become old and infirmed and aren't much used to society any longer, well, we'll help you leave this world a lot quicker. Because after all, of what value are you if you can't do? Deacons are called to service. They're called to be Christ for others. They're called to reach out, especially to those who need to know the faith, to those who are poor and in need of our services and our help and assistance. And there will be a lot to do. And in conscience, you will have to assume your responsibility and to do those things. But they are useless if we fail to remember who we are. We don't put on our diaconate or priesthood just at liturgy. We don't take it off when we're with our friends so that we can just be normal. We become the image of Jesus Christ. And so as we celebrate this Trinity, this oneness of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, we ask the Lord to bless all of us, but in a special way our deacon candidates, to be one with Christ. So much so that when they see you, you really resemble your master. When they hear you, they hear the Master, because you are more and more becoming one with Christ. Through the grace of this sacrament of orders and in our reception of the Eucharist, let us all leave this holy place more committed to be more like Christ, to be merciful and gracious, slow to anger, rich in kindness